Welcome to Kibbe on Liberty. This week I'm talking to my friend and colleague Logan Albright about his latest book, Freedom Over Fear, the story about how COVID lockdowns led him and his colleagues at Free the People to document various episodes in American history where the government grew its power by scaring us to death. Don't fall for it again. Check out this episode. Welcome to Kibbe on Liberty. Logan, how's it going?
It's going great, Kibbe. How are you?
I'm doing well. We're color coordinated across the board here.
Yeah, these are the ANCAP colors, yellow and black. So
now, why are anarcho-capitalists yellow and black?
well, black is the color of anarchy, and yellow is the color of gold. So it stands for capitalism.
What's the color of Bitcoin?
I don't know. That's a good question.
Yeah, because I feel like they're all crypto-anarchists
There's
now.
a whole rainbow of anarchist flags.
Yeah.
Michael Malice always says the black flag comes in many colors, but there's
Yeah.
like the anarcho-primitivists who are green and black, and the anarcho-futurists who are blue and black, and all anarcho-communists who are red and black.
Well, why are Free the People colors black and gold then?
I think you're the one who came up with that. So.
I was thinking of the Pittsburgh Steelers. I'll be
Okay,
honest.
yeah, that'll do it.
But we just didn't want to be red, white, and blue because everybody does that. But so you have a new book coming out,
I sure do.
which is in fact sort of red, white, and blue.
Yep.
Freedom Over Fear. I love the title, and this was give us the backstory because this was kind of born out of our shared horror at lockdowns and COVID authoritarianism.
Absolutely. So when I got into this business, like I know 12 years ago now, my thought of I was completely persuaded in the truth of libertarianism and the need to spread the gospel to the people. And I was under the very naive assumption that the way to do that was just to make logical, rational arguments, present evidence, the kind of things that people do in formal debates to try to persuade people. And it's been a long time trying to do that. And, I thought, well, if people knew that, free markets resulted in more wealth for everybody, they would be in favor of them. People who are like, they want to protect the poor people. If they knew that the minimum wage was actually designed to punish minorities and keep them out of the labor market, they'd be against it. If they knew all this stuff, I just have to tell them and then they'll be on my side. That turns out not to be true for the vast majority of people. And when the COVID lockdowns happened, I was extremely dismayed to see that a lot of like so-called, self-proclaimed libertarians, especially like DC libertarians, just completely abandoned all the principles that they had been fighting for years and years and years and said, we're libertarians, but not in the pandemic. And I think, was it the Washington Post who ran that article that said there's no libertarians in a foxhole? And there's some truth to that. Because
Joyfully writing that.
Joyfully writing that. But there is some truth to that because a lot of people did completely sell out over this. And I just was so upset to see people just abandon everything they'd fought for to say, please lock me down harder, Daddy. It was terrible. It took me a long time to kind of get over that. And I realized that
I'm not over it yet.
I'm not really over it yet
Yeah.
either. But what I realized is you can't really use rational arguments with people when they're afraid because fear completely drives rationality out of the mind. Frank Herbert famously wrote that fear is the mind killer in Dune, and I think there's a lot of truth to that. You can't think when you're afraid. And so what I realized is that the task of trying to make the country a freer place and to convince people that they should want to be freer is much bigger than I thought it was and much more difficult than I thought it was because you don't just have to persuade them that liberty is good. You have to somehow immunize them against fear. You have to make them realize that even when they're afraid of something, they need to still, be in favor of liberty and cling to these principles and everything. So that's kind of what I wanted to do. And then during the lockdowns, my colleague Sam Martin, the creative director of Free the People, he came up with the idea of doing a video series about this very topic. And he wanted to highlight kind of historical instances of the government using fear tactics to take away people's freedoms and liberties. And we wrote those scripts together and we produced a series of videos called Freedom Over Fear. And I thought this, a bunch of great stories we're collecting here in this research, and it would be a good book. And so I spent the next year or so doing research and writing this book, which is now available in paperback.
So this book is monumental for Free the People because technically speaking, it's the first Free the People book, although you've written many books.
That's correct.
And it is, I guess, self-published print to order on Amazon.
Yeah, that's right. We'll have it in the Free the People shop, but it all goes through Amazon. They have a print-on-demand self-publishing service that I've used in the past. But yeah, this is the first book under the Free the People moniker. And I decided that it would be better to try to just put it out ourselves rather than to go through a traditional publisher. Because for one thing, it's hard to get traditional publishers to say yes. For another thing, if they do say yes, they are incredibly slow. They're kind of dinosaurs, and they take at least a year to do all the editing and do all the cover design and things that we can do ourselves much faster. And I didn't really want to wait another year. It's already been, 3 years since the end of lockdowns, I guess, or 2.5 years since the end of lockdowns. I didn't want to wait another year for it. So I thought, why bother shopping it around to publishers? Let's just put it out ourselves. We can be so much more efficient. The other thing is that traditional publishers don't do a ton for you anymore these days. It used to be that they would market your book and get it put in bookstores and get you interviews and get you book signings and do all this stuff. They don't really do any of that anymore. They expect you to do it yourself. They expect you to have a big social media presence and be able to market it and sell it and do interviews and do publicity and set it all up yourself. Unless you're going with a really big publisher like Penguin or something. The independent ones they don't have the resources to do any of that. So there's not a huge advantage in doing it. And I've done it both ways. But I think this way we get to keep more of the royalties ourselves. We can be faster and more efficient. And we already have a marketing arm of Free the People to reach our list and to reach the viewers of this podcast. So it just seemed like the sensible thing to do.
Yeah, they really they sort of gobble up any margin of profit you might make. And I mean, I fully expect you to sell 1 million copies. So this could be your retirement plan right here.
That's the goal. We'll see.
Yeah. So I was thinking about, obviously we've obsessed about lockdowns at Free the People, and I've said this many times. I'm shocked at what people were willing to give up when they were afraid enough, and how honestly how leaky the Constitution and the Bill of Rights is when it comes to emergencies. You talk about our esteemed mayor Mario Bowser, who basically had carte blanche to do whatever she wanted, right, as did governors and other big city mayors. There were no protections of liberty during the panic.
No, and it doesn't really even matter if there were, because the people were demanding it. I mean, this is the problem. I used to think that it was the people versus the government, and the government's trying to take away our freedoms. We just got to be against them. But COVID really revealed that most of the people actually want these freedoms taken away. They want to be protected, especially in DC, where it's 99% blue. So that's a real problem. And yeah, the emergency authorization just means that they can do whatever they want without any kind of constitutional protections. We famously did that Everyone is Welcome documentary about our friend Eric, who runs the Big Board hamburger joint. And, they just indefinitely said, we're shutting you down. And he had no recourse, no due process, no way of fighting back against that. And he's engaged in a lawsuit to deal with that right now. But
by the way, yeah, so he's still in court.
Yeah.
What is it, 3-4 years later, trying to get some justice and maybe some compensation. But for a normal person, that's impossible.
Right.
Yeah. So just a couple days ago, Megyn Kelly was talking about, and she's now apparently the biggest podcaster. She's
huge. Yeah.
She's become huge, and I really like a lot of her stuff. But she's been talking a lot about the loss of liberty during lockdowns, and I think particularly as it pertains to school children and vaccine mandates and stuff like that, which you cover as well. And she says that stuff doesn't perform as well as the other programming that she does. It's almost as if people don't want to talk about what they did. There's some shame, right?
I hope that's the reason. I don't know if that's the reason or not. Maybe people just don't care that much anymore. But I hope that's the reason. I hope that people are ashamed of what they did, because they should be.
Yeah.
It is amazing what people are willing to give up.
Yeah. So it also and your book basically documents this. I was shocked at how much liberty people were willing to give up during a pandemic, and how much power the government accrued at all levels, at the city level, state level, federal level. And we're probably not going to be able to claw that power back from them. But the entire history of the United States that you document is basically a crisis and then Leviathan, to quote Robert Higgs.
So the first chapter is about COVID, but there's so many more instances in history. And one of the reasons I think that I was sort of immune from the the terror of COVID, because I really wasn't afraid of COVID. And it's not because I thought it was a hoax or anything like that. I always believed in it, but I wasn't that afraid of it. And I think the reason of that is that I have read history and I have some experience with the world. And I think the more you know about what has happened in the past, the less likely you are to succumb to these kind of tactics, because you're like, yeah, they told me that before. I mean, I remember the swine flu, I remember the bird flu, I remember Zika, I remember the West Nile virus, I remember all these different pandemics in the past. And like, people died and they were unfortunate and they were bad events, but we got through it and we didn't have to lock down the entire economy. And so, yeah, the first chapter is about that. But then I also wanted to document like many, many other instances throughout the history of the United States to show this is their game plan. They do this over and over and over again. And if once you recognize it and see that that's what they're doing, maybe you can be a little bit more psychologically resistant to it in the future. So you're not so likely to just panic.
There's also kind of there's the classic argument against giving government that much power, but there's also the knowledge problem. And I got an argument with a friend who was one of these, basically one of these pro-lockdown libertarians, very revered in our movement. And he's like, is there ever a scenario where giving the government this much power would make sense? What if COVID turned out to be, 1% death rate, 5% death rate, 10% death rate? Yeah. And I, in a fairly inarticulate moment, I'd be like, so what?
Right.
That was my response, because the government, and I didn't say it very well, but the government can't possibly know which one would be. And honestly, they can't possibly have the knowledge to mitigate that damage better than local knowledge and families and communities.
The question assumes that the government is capable of creating a better outcome than would happen naturally. And I think that is a big assumption to make. And I don't think the evidence of COVID shows that that's what would happen. So yeah, this is the Sam Harris line, right? Like, if things had been so much worse, it would have been so much better, because then people wouldn't have disobeyed the vaccine mandate and stuff. It's like, no, if things had been worse, things would have been worse.
Yeah.
And I don't think the government would have the power to do anything about that, even if we let them.
Yeah. And you don't really go down this rabbit hole, but I will, because you're part of this new series that I'm producing called The Cover-Up. And we're now learning that the virus was probably created in a lab, probably weaponized in a lab, probably accidentally leaked from a Chinese lab. And that itself, that mad science experiment, was supposed to keep us safe from another threat, bioterrorism. So we actually did demonstrable damage, we being the government.
Whipping people up into a frenzy of terror is almost never going to result in a safer, better world. And so that's the story over and over again.
Yeah.
The actual panic that they create in order to try to protect you ends up making things worse.
We've been like on quite a losing streak as libertarians since 9/11.
Yes, quite so. Well, I'd say since well before 9/11, honestly.
Are we going back to World War I?
Let's go back to World War I.
Yeah.
That'd be fun.
Yeah. But the war on terror, and you talk about that, like the fear of some unknown threats and all of the liberty we've given up because of that.
Every time I go through an airport, I'm like, why is the TSA here? They're clearly not protecting anyone from anything. It's obviously theater. It doesn't actually work. It's not stopping terrorism anywhere, but we all have to go through it because people want to feel protected, even if it's completely meaningless.
There's a funny sign next time you go through security and they take your picture, which they've started doing without our permission, without apparently any legislative authority to do that. But right below where they take your picture, it says, "Don't worry, we'll delete this immediately."
Yeah.
And my question is, well, what are you doing with it then? I assume you're comparing it to a picture you already have.
Yeah, I think it's
so you're going to delete that one. Yeah,
and then they compare it with that. I don't know. The TSA makes no sense. The more I learn about it, the more I think it's totally there for theater.
Security theater,
not helping anything.
Yeah, as all these things are ultimately. Like every time the government says they're going to protect us from something, it's theater that ultimately accrues power to them at our expense, but it doesn't do anything about our safety.
No. But you can see why they use the tactic, because it works so well.
Yeah.
As soon as you see it right now. We're in the middle of an election, and both sides are saying, if you don't do what we tell you to do, it's going to be the end of America. And so people are doing what they tell them to do because they're terrified, but they shouldn't be.
Well, they're eating the cats. Yeah, they're eating the dogs.
That's that story. I don't know when this is going out if that story will still be relevant or not, but like I think that story is a great example. I have a chapter in here called "Fear of Otherness," where it's sort of about xenophobia and the fear of foreigners and things like that. And it's the whole history, especially during wartime of America, is people being whipped up into fear about foreigners are going to do something bad and then doing horrible, evil things because of that. And I think this is, as far as I can tell from the available evidence that we've seen so far, the cats and dogs story is not true. But it's having severe consequences for people. People are, being shut. People's businesses are being shut down. People are being harassed and bullied in schools and all over Springfield, Ohio, based on rumors and based on this kind of moral panic. This idea. And then Trump in the debate said, they're coming for your cats and dogs. They're coming for your pets. It's like deliberately trying to use this language of fear to get you to vote for him. And I think that's crazy. And like, there's so many instances going back to World War I where they've just persecuted people for their nationality, for the way they look, for their race. And it's terrible. Like there's a story in the book that I learned about through researching the book that really upset me, which is during World War I, there was this conductor of the Boston Symphony Orchestra named Karl Muck. And he was born in Switzerland, but he was a Swiss citizen, but he spoke German. And there was a fad at the time during World War I, like, we got to be patriotic, we got to support the war effort, and everyone wanted them to promote the national anthem in symphony orchestras. And it wasn't even his decision. Like the owner of the orchestra decided, we're doing Mozart and Beethoven, we're not doing the national anthem. It's a little different. So they didn't play it. And the public got whipped up into this frenzy against Karl Muck. And they said, this guy's a traitor to America. He's German. He's, won't play the national anthem. We got to get rid of this guy. And they drummed him out of his career. He got arrested. He got put in a detention center for like a year. And he was eventually deported to Germany, even though he wasn't from Germany. He was from Switzerland. He had everything taken from him. And he didn't do anything wrong. He was completely innocent. But because he was German and the perception was we have to blame him for not playing the national anthem. And that's just one anecdote from like a whole history of putting people in detention camps and persecuting people. There's all these funny things that seem humorous in hindsight about like the reason we call hot dogs is that we weren't allowed to say Frankfurter back in the day because Frankfurter's German's evil.
Like freedom fries.
Like freedom fries. We called sauerkraut Liberty cabbage for a while. We called hamburgers Liberty sandwiches for a while. The governor of Iowa actually made it illegal to speak German in Iowa during World War I, and they passed a law that you couldn't send any German text through the mail without a translation provided. Like, there's all this history in Europe of like trying to stamp out minority languages through the legal process. And it's really horrifying to me as someone who loves languages and thinks they're beautiful to say like German was the second most commonly spoken language in America at the time. And they said, you're not allowed to use your native language anymore. You have to speak the language we want you to. I mean, English has never been the official language of the United States. There's no law saying that anywhere. But yeah, they just went after them. And that's nothing compared to what happened in World War II.
Regular viewers of Kibbe on Liberty already know how obsessed I have been with the pandemic industrial complex and all of the stupid, authoritarian, and downright evil things that the government did to us during COVID-19. Well, I'm proud to announce a new investigative series that looks to get to the bottom of all of that. It's called The Cover-Up, and I'm producing it in cooperation with BlazeTV. The only place you're going to see this is BlazeTV, so go to FauciCoverup.com/Kibbe and use the code FauciLied for $30 off your annual subscription. Do it now. The truth is out there. There's the original OG progressive, Teddy Roosevelt. You point out that he is credited with coming up with the phrase hyphenated American.
Yeah.
Explain what that is, because progressivism was so fundamentally racist and elitist. It's interesting that he would demagogue that word.
Yeah, I don't know that much about Roosevelt's uses of it. I know he was credited with popularizing the term hyphenated American, by which he means German American, Italian American, Polish American, Irish American, any of those type of things. But he was saying anyone who puts a hyphen in their name is disloyal to America. They're showing they have divided loyalties. And it got picked up. Woodrow Wilson used it very extensively and said that anyone who put a hyphen in their name, something like, carrying a hyphen around with you is like a dagger in the heart of America or something like that. And he said these are all enemies of the state. And then, during World War I, they really started persecuting these people, and it got much worse in World War II because the idea was that, you're not a German American, you're not an Irish American, you're an American. And if you try to pay any kind of tribute to your lineage and your heritage and your family, then you're not one of us. And, I think the whole beauty of America is that it's this melting pot and that we came from all over the world to settle this continent. And you have, people from all over Europe and all over Africa and all over South America and all over Asia coming. And it's nice that we all came together and formed one country. And the idea that you're not a real American because your parents are from Ireland or something. It's nuts to me.
Yeah, it takes a while for the pot to melt fully.
Yeah.
But we've kind of gone full circle where we're not apparently even talking about the melting pot is against intersectional America.
Yeah.
The new matrix of thinking. And now if we don't say African American, we're in trouble for that.
Right.
I think. I don't know. The rules change.
I don't know what you're supposed to say in place of African American anymore. That changes a lot. So
Yeah.
I'm not quite sure.
Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah, you're right. The politics of intersectionality is about dividing people up into groups.
Yeah.
And about saying we have to make sure we acknowledge every kind of heritage you have and every type of sexual identity you have and every gender identity you have. And all that has to be part of your identity. Whereas it used to be everybody come here and kind of become one thing. But again, in both of these cases, I think they're two sides of the same coin. They're both too extreme. They're both trying to use force to enforce how people are allowed to identify. And I don't think that's right. I think people should be able to be whatever they want. If you want to be a German American, that's fine. If you want to just be an American, that's fine too. But, this whole focus on identity seems really silly to me.
So you have a chapter basically on FDR about economic insecurity. Mm-hmm. And I was fascinated I don't think I'd ever done it before, read the entire quote from which you have nothing to fear, but fear itself comes from. It turns out it means the opposite of what I would have thought it meant, that he wasn't bucking us up to be more brave. He was saying, be more afraid so that you give me more power.
Yeah, it's a really ironic quote. One of the things I tried to do in the book was use as much of the actual words of these people as I could. So I quote extensively from political speeches and proclamations and legislation and stuff like that, because I want to show the rhetoric of fear and that they actually are trying to scare you. And the politicians will do this thing where they talk out of two sides of their mouth, and they'll say on the one hand, we have to not be afraid. We have to be brave. We have to make sure we go forward. And then in the same breath, they'll say, and also, here's all the terrible things that are coming for you. And if you don't give me more power, these are all going to get you. And that FDR speech is a great example of that, because he begins it with saying the only thing we have to fear is fear itself. And then he lists this parade of horribles about everything about the Great Depression that's coming to get you, that's coming to take your money, that's, the big businesses are hoarding wealth and all this stuff. And then he concludes by saying that's why we need to pass my plan for the National Industrial Recovery Act or whatever he was doing at the time, and completely centralizing the economy, doing price fixing, price controls, all kinds of crazy, really anti-American, to use the word that's kind of lost all meaning, fascist economic policies. And it was all just because he said, well, if we don't do this, the Great Depression is never going to end and you're all going to die in poverty. So, and he did that over and over again. He did that throughout World War II as well.
Yeah. So do you think it's safe to say that every time we've had a period of tremendous growth in government power, it was preceded by some irrational fear that politicians whipped up?
Seems that way.
Some of which are real, right? Like war is real. The attack on the Twin Towers was a real thing. But the fear is drummed up in order for them to do the things that they wanted to do anyway, but couldn't do it.
Yeah, that's a very good point. I'm glad you raised that, because that was something I wanted to say, is that I'm not in the book saying at all that you don't have anything to be afraid of. I don't agree with FDR. I don't think the only thing we have to fear is fear itself. There's lots of real dangers out there that people should be afraid of, but the problem is when you let that fear kind of suspend all your rational thinking, and that you just surrender everything else you believe in because you're not capable of making informed decisions anymore. You're not capable of considering trade-offs. You're not capable of comparing risks and analyzing, what's actually risky and what's not, because you're just letting emotion take over. That's the problem. And so, yeah, of course, war is horrendous and terrible. Poverty is awful. There's all kinds of things that we should be afraid of, but you have to face them courageously and you have to face them rationally, instead of just saying, someone else protect me from this because I don't know what to do.
So how do we break through on that? Like you started, and this is kind of the mantra at Free the People, that people aren't necessarily going to rationally consume history lessons or economic logic or facts
Yeah.
or reasonable arguments when they're afraid. They're going to process the world through their emotions, and we know that at Free the People. So, like, what do you do about the next pandemic? Are we just going to do it again, Charlie Brown style?
I think a lot about this, and I have a few theories and a few options. I think that the greatest enemy of fear is perspective and experience, because I think, why do babies cry all the time? Babies cry all the time because everything they're experiencing is the first thing they've ever experienced. So, the pain that they're feeling is the worst pain they've ever felt. The uncertainty they're feeling is the worst uncertainty they've ever felt. The hunger they're feeling is the sharpest hunger they've ever felt because they don't have any experience. So I think giving people the tools to learn what has happened in the past and what's happened in their own lives, and seeing that this has happened before, there's nothing new under the sun, as Ecclesiastes says, I think that's a big tool. And like, the more you can read about the past, I think that really is helpful in learning. Like, there's this idea now that like the world is the worst it's ever been. Everything is so terrible, and it's like, if you've ever read any kind of history at all, you know that that's not the case. The world is great. And, if you read about like the Victorian period and the lack of medicine, the lack of sanitation, the lack of running water, the lack of anything, resembling our modern technology, we have it so good. And I think people they forget that because they don't read history. They don't know what happened before. And so they think everything is new to them. They're like, oh, this election is the most important election in our lifetime, because they don't remember any previous elections, and I think that kind of historical perspective is the main thing people can do to kind of immunize themselves from it. The other thing is like, just having a personal philosophy, I think really helps, at least for me, because I know what I believe in terms of human liberty and, the role of government, and those beliefs don't go away when circumstances change, because those beliefs are core to who I am. And so, having developed that over the years, I'm like, yeah, I believe that the government shouldn't tell you when you can operate your business. And that doesn't change when someone says, well, what if you get sick? Like, I still believe that. It doesn't change. This is the problem with like radical empiricism, I think. People who just say, I just do what the data tells me to do. I just follow the data. There's some value in that, and we should care what the data says. But I think if you're willing to change your entire worldview because a paper comes out that says the opposite of what you previously thought, I think there's something wrong with that. I think it's dangerous. It can be exploited pretty easily. The nice thing about having these core beliefs is that I don't have to care what the papers say. I can just say, well, yeah, but I believe in freedom, so it doesn't matter what that paper says. So those are a couple of the options. I don't know. I think people need to think about it more, and people need to recognize that this isn't the first time this has happened. It's not the last time it'll happen, and we need to be clear-headed about it, because the more you let just emotion take over, the more you're going to end up surrendering, that you're going to regret surrendering later on.
We spent a lot of time picking on Andrew Cuomo when he was still governor of New York, and that was his go-to line. It's like, I'm just following the data.
Yeah.
And it's funny because it turns out he was actually cooking the data to hide some of the mistakes he made, particularly herding sick people into seniors' homes. And he was just on the Hill last week, I think, with the House committee that's investigating the government response to COVID. And he's still sort of belligerent about it. He still insists that he was doing the best he could based on the data, even though he did all the wrong things.
Right. Well, like, that's a dangerous position to be in, because you're so easily manipulated. Like, if the data says that you need to, murder all the immigrants, or if the data says that you need to, what else would be a good example? Put all the old people in nursing homes and lock them up there so they die. Like, are you just going to do that unquestioningly because the data said that? Like, it doesn't seem like a smart option to do.
Well, it goes back to this progressive thing, and the one of the weird obsessions that emerged from the COVID era was this sort of religiosity around the science and the data. And again, this goes back to progressivism and some really awful conclusions that they came to about how to treat minorities and people that were deemed genetically inferior by the science of the day.
I'm glad you brought that up. It's one of my favorite things to talk about, because no one knows about it, is the eugenics program in the early 20th century under Woodrow Wilson, the worst president we've ever had by a wide margin. He was an enthusiastic eugenicist because there was this fear of the, pollution of the race, the idea that mentally unfit people would be having children, and or criminals. Like it was believed back at the time that criminality could be inherited, and so if you let criminals have children, you're going to get more criminals. And so you had scientists and you had data back then. It was wrong, but they didn't know it was wrong. They thought it was right at the time, pointing to the fact that if you let these people reproduce, it's going to have bad consequences in the future. And so they sterilized by force, often without the person's knowledge, by tricking them. Tens of thousands of Americans were sterilized under the name of eugenics, of preventing the mentally unfit or the criminally minded from reproducing. And like, there's no data in the world you could show me that would make me agree to do that. It doesn't matter what the consequence is. It's morally wrong. It's a human rights violation, you know? And so when you're just a slave to what the data tells you to do, you end up justifying some really horrendous things.
Yeah. And then Hitler took that data and said, hold my beer.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Which is another inconvenient truth that people don't like to talk about.
Almost like Hitler was the bad guy in World War II.
Yeah. But a bad guy inspired by this quasi-scientific progressivism that insisted that some people had the power and authority to make us better people.
Yeah, the scientism thing is really bad, I think, because it abrogates all, it abdicates all moral responsibility from you. You say, I don't have to take responsibility for my decisions because that's what the data says. I'll just do that.
Yeah.
I think that's a bad way of approaching things. And that's not to be, I feel like I have to qualify everything I say these days because people jump on you. But, I'm not anti-science. I'm very pro-science. I think science is wonderful and great, and we should listen to science and we should find out the ways that it can improve our lives. But just blindly trusting any data that comes out without critically thinking about it. And the most important thing is without evaluating trade-offs. That's one of the things in COVID that was so nuts. Is like they were this monomania, is that we have to get 0 COVID cases. That's the only thing that matters. And in the meantime, we're not going to diagnose cancer or AIDS or anything else that's going on because we're so focused on COVID. It's like, okay, well, can you see how maybe that's going to create more problems than it solves? But they were unwilling to even consider trade-offs.
At Kibbe on Liberty, freedom is a lifestyle 24/7, something you live and breathe and wear every day. If that describes you, you need the very best Liberty swag in the market today, just like this shirt I happen to be wearing. Go to freethepeople.org/KOL and check out our exciting merch. You too can love liberty and look cool. Yeah, Francis Collins more recently admitted, we didn't think about the consequences. Maybe we should have, but he basically defended the idea that they would just focus on the one thing.
Yeah.
To devastating consequences. So scare us with some other fears that have historically allowed us to just give away all of our liberties.
I think the worst example in the whole book is the Japanese internment camps in World War II. There were 100,000 Japanese Americans, and some of them were, immigrants, recent immigrants from Japan, but some of them were American citizens. Some of them were the children of American citizens who just had Japanese lineage. 100,000 people put in concentration camps for several years during the course of World War II. And, it was just considered too dangerous. The Japanese attacked Pearl Harbor. You can't let Japanese people be wandering around California free. It's completely insane. And like you read about it and people just said, we have to do this. And it was demanded by the California citizens. They kind of put pressure on FDR to do this, and he empowered one of his generals to do it. They created what's called military exclusion zones all throughout California, Oregon, Washington, and said, we have the military right to exclude people from these zones if we think they're a risk. And no due process, no actual threat. They never convicted any of these Japanese citizens or Japanese Americans with any kind of treason or espionage charges. They just put 100,000 innocent people in jail for years, and then they let them out and said, okay, go back home and resume your career and your life now, as if that's a possible thing to do.
Yeah, rationalized in explicitly racist terms, too.
Yeah, insane. And when people were talking about putting people in COVID camps and stuff, and they're like, oh, that could never happen in America. We'd never allow that. Well, you allowed it in 1940. So you have to be aware of these things. They could totally happen again.
Yeah. Yeah, I was shocked at how, I would assume that every honest progressive that is horrified by Japanese internment camps would see the similarity of building COVID camps for people that were either unvaccinated or suspected of having a virus, and they just flipped on a dime.
Yeah.
Those camps are good camps, even though those bad camps were bad.
It's funny how they stop using the word concentration as well. The concentration camp, that just means people are concentrated together in one place. But after World War II, they didn't want to call them concentration camps anymore, so you come up with other names for them.
Yeah. So the question is, and this is like, obviously we fight these fights every day, but I think it's important to for people to acknowledge that we haven't outgrown doing really tyrannical, awful things to fellow Americans.
No.
Just because we've learned from history. We are absolutely. This is what I've decided about lockdowns. Total black pill. Americans, for all of our talk of freedom and mutual respect and all that stuff, we're probably capable of still always of the most awful things.
We haven't learned from history because we don't know history. I don't want to sound like one of these old people who's criticizing the young generation for not knowing anything, but like there was just an article that came out about Winona Ryder complaining about how her younger film stars have never seen any movies. She's like, how can you be a movie star and you've never seen any movies? It's crazy. But there seems to be this kind of real ignorance among the younger generations to not want to know about anything that happened in the past. And that's very dangerous. And because then, like I said, you don't have any perspectives, or everything that happens is the first time you're experiencing it. And so you think this is the worst it's ever been. You have to know about what happened so that you can't improve if you don't learn from history and see what happened in the past. And that's something I really worry about younger people not doing. And so that's why I write books like this. Even though young people don't read books, so it's probably a waste of time. But, maybe someone will read it. Who knows?
Well, we have a video series.
That's true. We do have a video series.
That accomplishes that as well. And Sam is such a handsome guy, too. Yeah. So don't tell him I said that. We do a lot on education at Free the People. And this gets, again, to this seeming contradiction. Everything you just described is true where young people perhaps don't have access to American history in school. Mm-hmm. They don't have access to the things that we think that every decently educated person should know. But they also have access to your video series.
That's
and
true.
Your books.
Yep.
And Joe Rogan and a million other history channels and everything else.
Oh, the access is certainly there.
Yeah.
If anyone who chooses to pursue it, they can do so.
So are you optimistic or pessimistic about the ability of young Americans to educate themselves, even though the education system itself is a dumpster fire?
I'm going to steal a line from David Friedman, who we interviewed years ago, and he said he's optimistic by temperament, which is what I am. I'm optimistic in spite of all the evidence, basically, is how I feel. I think that there's some reason for optimism. Like, one of the things that really encourages me is how many people are now withdrawing their children from school and teaching them at home, because the schools are not teaching them anything of value as far as I can tell. That encourages me. There are a lot of smart young people. I know I just spent 5 minutes dumping on young people and saying how stupid they are, but there's a lot of great ones out there, a lot of smart ones, and they're intelligent and thirsty for knowledge. And so I think that there's a lot of potential there as well. And like you said, the availability of all this information has never been greater, because the internet means you can get the entire access of human knowledge at your fingertips whenever you feel like it. So, yeah, as long as people are willing to spend the time learning about this stuff, I think there's a lot of reason for hope. But it's going to take me a while to recover from the pessimism that COVID instilled in me, because I just saw how many people were willing to throw away so much for no reason, really. That's going to take some time to recover from. But I'm hoping that people will learn from that and come out the other side of it wanting to live in a freer country. We'll see.
I think part of the process is to understand that you were manipulated and lied to. And it's got to start with some sort of righteous anger about what they took from us.
And it does seem like people are less willing to trust the media anymore, or the mainstream narrative. It's like, I hear people complaining about this. Like, nobody knows what's true anymore. Are they eating the cats and dogs? We have no way of knowing. And I think maybe that's not as bad a thing as people think it is, because people are starting to get a little bit, they're tired of being lied to, and they're saying, okay, well, I know that they're saying this on the news, but is that really true? Probably not. Everything else they've said in the last 5 years isn't true. So I think a growing distrust of kind of legacy media is certainly a positive step in the right direction.
Yeah, I say this all the time. You've heard me say it 1,000 times. We're in the middle of a paradigm shift, and I think the first step is to discover that these trusted institutions, starting with the government and, your senator who tells you one thing and then does another thing, realizing that they're lying to you is the first step towards actually a process of getting to what actually is true.
Yeah.
And wondering whether or not the media stories that you read are true is probably a healthy thing, because then you go out and do your own research.
Yeah.
You have to,
without doing your own research, there's no way of knowing what's true and what's not. You have
Yeah.
to do it. And I think encouraging people to do that is probably a good thing on net, even though a lot of people aren't going to bother. The ones that do bother are going to learn more about how the world works. So that's good.
Jimmy Dore has this great skit that is kind of a viral clip on X now, where he makes fun of people who were criticizing people during lockdowns, particularly in the context of vaccines, to do their own research. And he compares it to going to an expert, the car salesman, and just deferring to him on what car and how much you should pay.
Right.
Well, that's stupid.
Of course,
And
because
no
he
one
has
would
an
do that.
incentive to sell you the most expensive, worst car he can.
So I try to be optimistic as well about the potential of free people to figure stuff out on their own, and that, of course, is the entire basis of our philosophy, the wisdom of crowds, that people, if they're free enough, have the ability to sort of figure stuff out on their own, even though they're not necessarily they didn't go to the right schools, and they may get things wrong all along the way, but that process is going to lead to something more true than the
Community
experts.
notes has been a big boon to the wisdom of crowds, I think.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. It's fun to see someone righteously community noted. Thank you for joining me today on Kibbe on Liberty, and for being part of our fiercely independent audience. Every week, my organization, Free the People, partners with BlazeTV to bring you this show. My guests bring smart perspectives on everything from current events to timeless philosophical debates. If you like what you hear, go to freethepeople.org/KOL and support Kibbe on Liberty, so we can continue to produce these honest conversations with interesting people. Now, let's get back to it. So what is, give me one more chapter, and then let's insist everybody buy this book.
Okay, so we are both big music fans, and so I thought I'd talk about the chapter. There's a chapter called Fear of Corruption, which is kind of about the moral panics about children. And it kind of started with like the Comics Code Authority. The Senate started having hearings on comic books being, a corrupting factor against youth, which is insane to me. Like, why is the Senate having hearings about comic books? And then that kind of morphed into the Satanic Panic, which is something I've written about before. That's fascinating to me. It's this whole period of about 2 decades in the 70s and 80s when the whole country just became convinced that there were Satanists everywhere behind every corner conducting ritual sacrifices. And it's kind of like the pet eating thing. There's no evidence for it at all. But, people just became convinced of this, and they started shrieking about it, and there were all kinds of government hearings, and it ruined a lot of lives. There were, teachers and nursery school owners and stuff who got arrested and went through long legal proceedings trying to clear their names of being accused of molesting children and engaging in ritual satanic abuse. None of it was true. It was all fake. And that went on for a long time. And then that kind of got swept up into this whole like panic about music, because people started hearing heavy metal music and they thought, well, that music scares me. It sounds loud. I don't understand it. It must be evil. It must be part of this whole satanic craze. And so you had the formation of the Parents Music Research Council that was by 4 wives of senators, basically, 4 powerful women. That's the thing, is like, people think that this is just a group of concerned moms. Like, it wouldn't have had the same effect if it was just a group of concerned moms. It was
Al Gore's wife, Tipper.
Al Gore's wife,
famously.
Tipper, being the most famous one.
Yeah.
They were very unhappy with the music that their children were listening to and decided the government needed to get involved. And so they had a whole series of hearings about that. And this is like, this is less of a big deal than putting 100,000 people in concentration camps. But it matters because it creates this kind of soft censorship where everyone's afraid to do what they really want to do. Everyone's afraid to say what they want to say because the government, here comes the senators' wives, and they're going to haul you before the Senate, and they're going to have a hearing, and they're going to yell at you in front of everybody. And so, a lot of these things that I write about in this book are nominally adopted voluntarily by the industries. The Comics Code Authority was adopted by the comics industry. The labeling of, parental notices on CDs and records was adopted voluntarily by the record industry. But it's not really voluntary because you have this threat of the U.S. Senate over there saying, if you don't do it voluntarily, we're going to force you to. And so I think people need to realize that when you just say something's done voluntarily, it isn't really done voluntarily. And like the reason I wanted to write about that particular thing so much is that there's an amazing Senate hearing where you had Dee Snider from Twisted Sister, Frank Zappa, and John Denver, of all people, giving 3 like incredibly eloquent defenses of free speech and artistic expression against the Parents Music Resource Council. And it's I just wanted to like quote those speeches because they're so inspiring and great for someone who loves free speech.
You know what's funny is if you take Tipper Gore's list of albums that she was anxious about and lay it over a list of Soviet era banned rock albums, it's almost the same list.
Yeah.
And it, thinking about how innocent it was that she was, it sort of comical and innocent in the context of, she was worried about Prince's song, Darling Nikki. But fast forward to today where the government has been censoring all sorts of speech, and we're now discovering to the extent to which they have been advising, I'll put that in danger quotes, advising social media companies what's allowed to be said. So it is as silly and obnoxious as it was back then. It's now weaponized in a very dangerous way.
Well, yeah, when I was writing that chapter, they were working on this Kids Online Safety Act. I think that's done now, but that was something that was really concerning me because they were going to, require age verification for basically the entire internet for anything that could potentially be, offensive or harmful to children in any way. And they were going to put an affirmative onus on these web companies to make sure.
Which, by the way, is everything.
Yeah, it's everything.
Yeah.
Like it's Wikipedia. It's anything that kind of like tries to catalog human knowledge is going to have some upsetting stuff in it. And they were putting its affirmative duty on these web companies to make sure all the people visiting their sites are above 18. It's just a nightmare of enforcement. And I really was upset by that. I'm glad it didn't pass because I remember when I was very young and I was exploring the internet for the first time when the internet was like new. And how liberating it was to like be able to learn about stuff on my own without any permission from anyone else and find out all this information about the world. And do you run across some dodgy material? Of course you do, but I think it's worth it because, I have a good relationship with my parents. They trusted me. They said, these are the kind of stuff you want to avoid online. And like so many of these things are a substitute for good parenting. And that's something actually John Denver said, which is great. He said, why instead of having the government get involved and tell you what music you can listen to, why not try parenting your children? Which I think is just fantastic.
Who knew that John Denver was a badass?
It was a surprise to everyone because he's this like squeaky clean Christian, and they thought he's going to be on the side of censorship, but he was great.
Yeah. The Zappa speech to this day is something worth revisiting. The bottom line is if you don't want to get fooled again, you have to buy Logan Albright's new book, Freedom Over Fear.
Correct.
Otherwise, they're going to get you.
Don't get fooled
and you're going to make a fool out of yourself.
Fooled you once, you can't get fooled again.
Yeah, all these guilty libertarians watching who sort of fell for mask mandates and vaccine mandates and lockdown mandates. Read this book; it'll immunize you from the next fear mongering.
And the last chapter, the afterword, is basically a list of tips on how to immunize yourself from fear a little bit based on my own experience.
Yeah. Well,
available now on Free the People's website on Amazon.com in paperback, and I think the Kindle version is probably up by now as well. I got to get the Kindle version done.
Cool. And snappy suit that you brought to this conversation.
Thank you.
I try
to look nice for you.
I know you do, and I have to shamelessly flack our new Dickies work shirt, proudly festooned with the Free the People logo.
It's a very handsome shirt.
Those will be available at some point as well.
Yes.
So when you're buying the book, come and get the shirt, and then you're completely immunized from authoritarianism.
Sounds good to me.
All right. Thank you, Logan.
Thank you, Matt.
Thanks for watching. If you liked the conversation, make sure to like the video, subscribe, and also ring the bell for notifications. And if you want to know more about Free the People, go to freethepeople.org.